Welcome to the LDN Radio Show, brought to you by the LDN Research Trust. I'm your host, Linda Elsiegood. I have an exciting lineup of guest speakers who are LDN experts in their field. We will be discussing low-dose Naltrexone and its many uses in autoimmune diseases, cancers, etc. Thank you for joining us. Today I'd like to welcome back the LDN Research Trust Medical Advisor, Dr. Sarah Zielsdorf. Thank you for joining us today, Sarah.
Thank you so much for having me, Linda.
Well, now we're near the end of 2025. Could you give us a roundup of LDN's use in your practice?
I think all of us who deal in the space of chronic medical illness, I think are continuing to be impressed by how much of a heavy lifter low-dose naltrexone is for certain patients. It doesn't work for everyone equally, and it doesn't work for everybody at all. But for those that it really helps, boy, it can be a huge game changer. Now, for people who don't know me and my practice, I have a consultative practice in the western suburbs of Chicago in the United States, and I treat very chronically ill patients, patients with autoimmune disease, patients with mast cell activation, hypermobility / EDS, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. I have patients who have many chronic illnesses, who have been dealing with long COVID, or also what we call polymicrobial infections, where they're dealing with lots of chronic viral infections, and this can lead to CFS-ME or chronic fatigue syndrome, and a bunch of other symptoms that we really talk about as long COVID or post-viral syndromes. I'm a microbiologist, and I'm really excited to be working and helping my patients to deal with these things where other doctors have literally said we don't know what's going on. And low-dose naltrexone is increasingly being used for all post-viral conditions. There are some wonderful new papers. I'm really excited that in 2025, we have lots more research that's coming out from our colleagues, and I'm hopeful that that will lead to more and more studies, bigger studies that we need for patients using low-dose naltrexone. I think that's huge. We're seeing a lot more data from many different areas in medicine that's saying how that they use LDN. I'm seeing more and more doctors knowing about low-dose naltrexone in the pain community, and that's exciting. I am using it, as per usual. I always say it's kind of like depending on where you live, you put hot sauce on it or you put ranch dressing on it. We put LDN on everything. We really appreciate naltrexone for what it does as an immune modulating agent and as an anti-inflammatory. I am using it very much for everybody that I can in the community of mast cells. It is a mast cell stabilizer. So for MCAS and dysautonomia, and for people who are on the hypermobile spectrum. I think that that's incredibly important. I also am using it a lot for my GI patients with bacterial overgrowth, SIBO, where I'm really trying to work on their motility, as it can be a prokinetic. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But I'm really especially using it in my chronic viral illness patients, getting them stabilized, or Lyme patients, mold patients, getting them stabilized and getting them on LDN when I can is so incredibly important. And I think that I just keep learning and growing with regard to that. And as far as, protocols, Linda, you and I have been talking about, I'm in the midst of updating these protocols. And I think what we're seeing is just a greater breadth and depth of dosing, both from the very low micro dosing in the microgram range of naltrexone to what Dr. Paul Anderson coined as high low-dose naltrexone, where we're seeing twice a day dosing. Some practices are doing even more frequent dosing, up to 4 times a day. But for compliance purposes, I don't usually do it more than twice a day. But twice a day higher dose, like 4.5 milligrams twice a day, or 6 milligrams twice a day, or 9 milligrams once a day, for more pain conditions, patients that have more inflammation than autoimmune flare in more severe pain conditions or rheumatologic conditions. I'm seeing higher doses being kind of pushing that low dose, with us still agreeing that there is value in doing that and not going maybe above, say, 12 total. The other issue is that patients' guts are so much sicker, so they've got a lot of malabsorption. So that 12 milligrams might not actually be 12 milligrams that they're getting. So I think that's one thing that I've been seeing, is just that I've been kind of saying this since I think the 2017 conference, and then really the 2019 conference blew my mind, just saying, wow, we're doing a lot of different things. And then COVID hit, and then it was all of us doing a bunch of things for a few years, coming back and saying, okay, we're doing a lot more and a lot more different things. And now this is just that continuum. We continue to build on what was done during COVID time, and we're continuing to extrapolate what we learned to our chronically ill patients now.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So what do you see for 2026?
I see more collaboration. I hope for more collaboration and more doctors asking questions, because it's not that these patients are just going to Mayo Clinic or Cleveland Clinic or academic hospitals around the world. They're in every clinic, and every doctor needs these tools to be able to treat chronically ill patients. And so I think my hope is that more and more doctors start to reach out, and look up when a patient brings the guidelines or asks their doctor, can I try LDN? And they say, what is LDN? Instead of being met with, oh, is that for drug addicts or something stupid like that, which they often say, it's, oh, I've heard of that. I know it's used for pain, but I don't know much about it. I'm hoping that drives more conversation with saying, hey, let's, there's a trust for this. There's a lot of doctors that are using it. Let me do some research. Oh, I don't, and then them coming back to the patient saying, I don't really know much about it, but I also don't see too much risk for you trying this. And for us to be able to, encourage patients to, give them references to say, oh, okay, we need a compounding pharmacy. Here's the compounding pharmacy in my area that prescribes this. And that doctor, can reach out to the pharmacy and get more information. I think our compounding pharmacists are some of the greatest resources, because A, they know so much about it. B, they work with all the doctors in the region. And C, they really know the ins and outs of dosing, prescribing, side effect profile, and can really help the clinician to feel comfortable with prescribing it, and also being able to know how to deal with, troubleshooting in case there are side effects.
Mm-hmm. And the other question we get asked a lot is, would LDN be available on insurance?
Unfortunately, so in the United States, in our system, I just don't know that will be covered. I just don't. We have 50 milligrams. That's the standard dose that is used for alcohol tolerance, and starting for alcohol dependence, and that's 50 milligrams, and that really can't be broken too easily. And we really have encouraged over the years, Linda, you and myself, and pharmacists have said, please, don't be desperate to just get this. Doctors are willing to write for 50s for people, but it's very hard to get precise dosing, even though it's all over the internet on how to do it. We really don't recommend doing that. I do think, so we have Contrave in the US, that is bupropion and naltrexone in a lower dose. I don't see it being out of the realm. I just think that because naltrexone itself is not a proprietary thing that that drug companies can make money on, and that's what's saved us from, actually being able to have this and not have it taken away from us as some designer drug, because it's a cheap generic thing that they have to combine it with other drugs. I do see them continuing to use naltrexone and maybe have a low dose that's combined with something else. And I have used Contrave for patients, although the naltrexone part is higher than I want. So I think that there may be an insurance option that combines naltrexone, and my hope would be that they would be combining LDN with something else in a very low dose that might also be working for inflammation and other conditions. Actually, that is a fantastic idea for big pharma, but I actually hope that that it never gets made as a proprietary drug that we can't compound at a low dose for a cheap option. Now, naltrexone, in the United States, it gets compounded at about $20 or $30 a month without insurance. So about 60, I've seen it as low as $60 for a 3-month supply, even now. So we're still keeping it fairly for someone who's on their maintenance dose of, say, 3 milligrams, 0.5 milligrams, or 1 milligram, 4.5 milligrams, 3 milligrams. They're able to get it at a pretty decent cash price. But yes, that would always be my hope, is that we could get insurance coverage.
Mm-hmm. And the good thing is, with having it compounded like you do in the US, if you have, say, MCAS and you're ultra sensitive to fillers, your pharmacy can work with you and find something that you can tolerate. So, it's a win-win, isn't it? And like you say, it's not that expensive in the grand scheme of things.
Absolutely. And there's so many drugs that are just hellaciously expensive. And for the promise of LDN, which again, I never promise that it fixes everything. And I think that's another thing that I keep learning, is that people are so unique, and sometimes LDN does so much for someone. You and I have talked a lot about our own stories on what LDN does for us. And it's not that it's uncommon. It's very common for it to help people with MS or Hashimoto's, which we have. But it's not that everybody has that response. And so you started the charity because of what it did for you, and that you desperately wanted other people to have this information. Your heart is of gold, and I give my time and my energy because I'm so passionate about it, of what I've seen in thousands of patients and what it's done for my own life. Absolutely. But you can never make that promise, being like, oh, it's going to do this for you. And that's the tough part, because I want so badly for LDN to work for everyone. I really do. And it's just like any other treatment. It just doesn't. But I think and know, as a clinician, it works far better than so many other, drugs that we use.
Mm-hmm. One last question that people are always asking is, how long should I try LDN before I decide it doesn't work for me?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So let me talk about that. So if you were going to be my patient, Linda, and I were having this conversation about, just like I do, and I say, okay, Linda, we're going to start naltrexone, we're going to start LDN, and kind of here's what I want here's what I want to tell you as far as expectations. First of all, it's going to be a trial and error process of dosing. Dosing is what we call idiosyncratic. So I'm going to start you, for autoimmune, I'm going to start really low. I'm going to start with 0.5 milligrams, and I'm going to have you go up every 2 weeks by 0.5 milligram. And we're going to see if we can get you to 3 milligrams. And that's going to take, at least 8 weeks, maybe even 3 months. And we're going to go and see if we can find what we call the maximum effective dose, or the MED. And, what we're going to do is have you increase every 2 weeks, and say you get to the next dose and you're feeling more drowsy, or you're feeling kind of loopy or weird, or your stomach's going, or you have headaches, then you're going to go back to the last dose that you tolerate. And so say we get you at whatever dose that you tolerate, and say that's 3 milligrams. And you're going to, then I'll prescribe, I'm prescribing you this low dose that you can take half pills of, once you get on the best dose for you, I will put in that to the pharmacy, say that's 3 milligrams. You'll get a maintenance dose of 3. And I would like you to stay on this dose, whatever dose is best for you. I would like to stay on it for 12 to 18 months. Why is that? We like to, and this is really tough, because a lot of patients will say, I don't feel any different. When can I go off this? I really like to say 18 months, because that really has been the time that we see max efficacy, the effects that we're going to have for autoantibodies and other conditions that have immune dysregulation. This upregulation of all of the support for the immune system, and I don't want to say that the immune system is upregulated, because the immune system is being modulated. It's changing, and it takes time, because you're doing this very naturally. You're increasing endorphins and enkephalins by manipulation of the opioid receptor, and it takes time. So I always like to see, so there have been some studies, and some of our contributors to the trust, doctors that have done presentations that have used their own patients on LDN, right? there was a thyroid presentation, and they showed, maximum, kind of work on the antibodies at about 18 months. And that's kind of what I see too. It's a very low and slow process that really takes at least a year, to be fair. A lot of people don't see it work like, perfectly right within 1 month. And so I like to have it have patients take at least 12 to 18 months. If at 18 months they say, I've given it a year and a half, I don't feel any different, we say, okay, take a drug holiday from it. And I like to have patients go off it, see how they do. And a lot of times patients will be like, oh, wow, I didn't realize I had, less pain. I didn't realize I had, XYZ symptom, before. And they often decide to go back on it themselves. But some do not. Some say, I don't notice any difference. And there weren't, wasn't a difference in my labs. So I work with each patient on it.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's fantastic. Well, we've come to the end of our time, and I would like to thank you again for everything that you do for the LDN Research Trust. It really is appreciated.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Any questions or comments you may have, please email me, Linda, Linda, @ldnrt.org. I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you for joining us today. We really appreciated your company. Until next time, stay safe and keep well.